Think I had a sasquatch experience when I was a child. Or that's the only way to explain what it was. It would follow me around in the woods. Smelled moldy. But never tried to hurt me. My great uncle said he was making sure I was safe. I heard something roar so loud and thunderous from about 100 yards away. I was with a camping party. We all got in the vehicles and drove off for about an hour before returning. Didn't go looking for nothing. Whatever it was, didn't like us being near it. Never heard something like that. Had camped there plenty of times before with no concern whatsoever. That made everyone think the same thing, though. And that was, give this thing some space. Wow, Waitchpeck, south of the Bluff Creek, on 96 Klamath River, lived there in the summer of 1949. Dad was contract logging for sugar pine lumber at Hooper Reservation. Bigfoot is fun and games. I was 3 years old. Local legend. Rumor has it there are catfish the size of Volkswagens at the Bullard's Bar Dam. Back in '03, April 23rd, spring turkey season, my late father and I was hunting in Woodbury Wildlife Area near Coshocton. We arrived early in the morning, before the sunrise, as our technique. It was to have a few minutes to see what was going on before heading out. We opened the windows and started to listen to the sounds, but it smelled bad outside. And he said a bear must have killed something or was hit by a vehicle. Whatever it has been dead for a while. We rolled them back up and still tried to listen out, but no sound was made. The woods usually had some sounds. Not that morning. Just as it was getting light, we planned where we was going, got our gear, and started walking to our areas. He was going across the road. I was going to the other side and back to where they roosted. As I made my way back, camouflaged from head to foot, I noticed on another trail what looked like another hunter walking parallel to me, and in the clearing up ahead, I was going to talk to him. He stepped up to a tree, but when we scouted in the fall, I didn't remember it being there. Well, I stepped out of the shadows into the trail and said, "Hello, hunter here." The tree turned toward me, 9 to 10 feet tall, big and growling. The other one had a stick in its hand and started hooting and yelling, moving behind the big man. That is like the face, a hairy giant man. As he hit his chest, I gripped my 12 gauge and started moving back towards the truck. As I got there, Dad was on the other side saying he found a big deer ripped to shreds all over, and it must have been a big bear. And as I jumped to my side of the truck, I said that was no bear. Then we heard a loud roar. We left that area and we never went back. I had my encounter in the fall of 1992, 30 years ago, on Harry Soanes Road in Henley Field, Mississippi. Driving out to my BF's place, as I rounded a curve, just before a creek bridge, the big fella was sitting in the middle of the road, about 3 feet tall, sitting down, big, thick, dark, and hairy. He stood up in 2 leaps and was off on the road into the woods. 30 years later, I was told by a gal in our local BF group that in '92, 2 18-year-old girls she went to school with had an encounter with the exact same spot as mine, Only the BF ran out in front of their car, and naturally they hit their brakes. It then beat on their hood of their car, terrifying them. This made both of our encounters legit. Heard a huge knock along looking Tremble Rapids while we were hanging out in the bridge. In 1977, myself and 4 Boy Scouts came across tracks of a Bigfoot in the snow. The distance between the stride was near 48 inches. The tracks were about 18 inches long. We followed them near a dense thicket of trees and oak brush. Then we all got a very intense feeling of being watched. That we needed to leave now. Which we did. But not before we heard the breaking of branches, and the area had gone very quiet. The birds that were making a little noise just stopped. I'm convinced that there was a Bigfoot nearby. 4 of my family members have seen them in the Great Smoky Mountains on 44-1 across the mountain from Tennessee to Cherokee, North Carolina. When I was a kid, an old man in California, Shasta, Trinity National Forest, told me he saw one take a crap and wipe its butt and lick its hands. Ew, you don't forget that. There's a giant snake where I look for fossils. I've seen weird shadows in the water, but luckily I haven't had too close of an encounter yet.
The only personal experience I've had been positive. Even one saved my best friend's life. We did a stupid thing though. After watching us for about 2 weeks, we went into the woods after the one watching us and ended up losing our memory at different times and feeling lost and nauseous. I only remember going in after him running and hiding, and I climbed the tree structures after him. After that, I remember regaining my memory in a small meadow nearby and being lost. Then after walking out, I remember losing my memory again until we were about half a mile away. I had been shaking uncontrollably and telling them what had happened to me. They were fascinated and told me what had happened, but soon lost their memory too. We all didn't feel well for hours. One gentleman, no nonsense type of guy, swears as he was sitting turkey hunting, he noticed these things flying around about 15 yards away. He was trying to figure out if they were dragonflies or what, and soon they came right up to him and flittered around right in front of him. He swears they were fairies. He's never seen anything like them before, and it totally freaked him out. Said about how they seemed to have an ethereal type glow and look to them. And they didn't sit still for long at all. They hung around for a few, then shot off. He said he even seen them twice since that day while hunting. My mom always swore when she was a little girl living in Ireland, she had fairies in her garden. Yes, I thought I was seeing things. Watched it for about 2 minutes through my front window, then it flew away. So fast I did not see it go. I was surrounded by white light and a couple of inches big. I hear them laugh when I'm out at the garden, but I've not seen one since. I feel very lucky they chose to let me peek into their world. I talk to them while on walks and in my garden. I sense them when they are around or I'm near a fairy dwelling when I walk through the forest. Sometimes I smell a scent of a mix between musky and nectar. Can't really describe it, but it sharply comes at you, and then the scent is gone within a breath. I was trout fishing in Rivers Idlid just before twilight. They started biting. Stayed too long. Good thing, full moon. A 2K walk down the trail, about halfway down, all night sounds stopped. Holy crap, no sound, but had Defender. What a chill till I got to the village. I was turkey hunting. Didn't even believe in Bigfoot. I laughed at those who did. Then this 9-foot tall beast stepped into my world. I believe and I know they are real. I was 16 when it happened. I'm 60 now, and I've never sat back in the woods where it happened. Won't ever go back. I was doing the same thing the Bigfoot was, for the same reason. He had ripped off the right side antler of a 5x5 bull elk, which then ran down and hid 3 steps behind my cousin/hunting partner. The creature then screamed, threw a bowling ball sized rock at us, then ran up the mountain at unbelievable speed. My cousin and I continued to stalk the large elk herd. My cousin eventually killed a nice cow elk with his bow. The creature was upset with us. It was freaky, but we still never really felt threatened. We built an off-grid home west of Packwood, Washington, at the start of a Forest Service road that ended 13 miles and at 4,500 feet. It was impassable most winters for 4 to 6 months, and the area is roughly rugged. At the top is a 5-acre lake for a few weeks that offers skinny trout. On the way upstream, it wanders through this area. It turns from a creek to a swamp, back to a creek again, finally through a gorge, its destination in the cowlets. No part is an easy go. I took my canoe and my fly rod up to the lake one afternoon. The road goes within 100 yards of the lake. It was dead calm, quiet, and not a soul around. I spent about 45 minutes flogging the water, but the trout were on a bite break. As I sat there wondering if I should have brought a DuPont spinner to liven things up, a tree fell on the rise from a far end of the lake. Normally, I'd not thought much of it, but I looked for wind, not a puff. Looked for other causes, none showed. I paddled my canoe towards that part of the lake that would give me a view of where I thought the tree had fallen. I had a sense of arrested curiosity. Go, don't go. My only weapon would be a canoe paddle. Yeah, right. I turned and paddled back towards the truck. Thinking back, I remember a couple piles of crap that served to stop me from going further. Feelings of darkness and foreboding that I could not shake. Yet, the next time I was in the area, not one problem. So back in 2012, I was working at a dog boarding kennel. They had just cleared about 6 acres of trees behind the kennel to build a fast food restaurant. There were fallen trees everywhere. This is a rapidly growing town. I had about 30 dogs out that morning. There were 3 separate yards for about 10 dogs to play in. 4 runs for dogs that didn't get along well with the other ones to be outside. More dogs were coming in for doggy daycare, so it could have been over 30 dogs out at the time of the morning. I was pooper scooping and hosing down the yards. I noticed all the dogs had stopped barking. That never happens with that many dogs out together. That's what caught my attention. Then I noticed all the dogs were facing the same direction, looking at something. So I looked in the direction that they were all facing. It looked like a very large, hairy man. He had long hair and a long beard. The hair on his arms was long enough to swing back and forth as his arms moved while he was walking. He was built very large, like a tall bodybuilder. He had almost no neck, and his arms were so long that they went down almost past his knees. His hair color was multicolored, mostly brown and some red. So I thought, why is that guy wearing a fur coat? He also walked kind of funny. Then I noticed he wasn't wearing any shoes. He walked through all those fallen trees and debris with ease, just kind of stroking. He also seemed to be looking at the ground and searching for something. I really couldn't figure it out. So when I had a chance, I went out there. I couldn't walk through all those fallen trees and debris, even with my boots on. I could not wrap my head around what I've seen. My first experience when I was 3 or 4, and I went outside and played in a little grove of trees, maybe 100 feet from my house. One day, there was this little black boy there. He didn't look too much different than us, and when we played with trucks, running them up and down the little bank. I remember trying to get him to come out of the ravine, and he would hide every time. His mother watched us from the tree above, close enough to swing down and snatch him if needed. He was there on and off for about 2 to 3 weeks. One day his family had moved on or back deeper in the woods. That was the first of many encounters. I think it was next spring they came back and we built tiny teepees together. They stayed for 2 weeks that time. I actually don't remember the teepee building, but my dad said I told him and my mom that. We also played mimicking games with him. We'd yell things in the woods, and the little ones would mimic it back. Later, as a teen, we went to a place in the woods where we could picnic and swim, and a male Bigfoot watched us. He would steal our food, so we needed to bring a lot extra, so he would leave us alone. We went there all summer trying to coax him to come out of the tree line. One day we played tricking with the train. My sister and I got off, and my friend froze, and we screamed at her to get off. Well, that did it. He came out of the woods and was very worried. He looked very human, like a Neanderthal. Large brow ridge and cheekbones, big muscles, brown skin. He was human. He ran down and rescued my friend within a second of being hit. The train had stopped, and the two men said, "Did you see that? That was a Bigfoot." After that, people started following us with guns loaded. They always would have something happen where they didn't know what was going on. I'm guessing they were hit with infrasound. Anyways, I've always known there are people that are large and live in the woods. My dad seen glowing red eyes about 8 or 9 feet off the ground. When he passed that spot, there was a very bad smell, like rotten eggs. It happened at night when he was going to work. A buddy of mine was hunting in East Texas. He was waiting for dark to climb out of the tree he was in. He told me just before dark, when it was still light enough to see silhouettes but not details, he heard something rustling up the trees pretty loud. As the noise got closer, he could make out a man-like shape figure going from tree to tree, squaring down and digging around the base of each tree. He watched it as long as it was visible, then listened to it until it was far enough away he felt comfortable leaving his tree stand. He said he backed the whole way out of the woods with his gun pointed towards the direction he last heard the creature. I was only told this story after much begging on my part. My buddy still claims he doesn't believe in Bigfoot, but he has no explanation for what he saw that night. He was reluctant to even tell me the story, and as far as I know, I'm the only person he told. But he was recounting his experience. I could see the fear in his eyes, so I don't believe he is lying to me. Let's just leave it at the only reason I didn't see him and the 3 others in the group is my back was turned to him. Otherwise, I would have seen him. Instead, just heard him or her. My dad was fishing with my grandfather as a child. They were in a boat on the Black Warrior River in Tuscaloosa County, Alabama. Heard something on the banks of the river. Then he said something began throwing huge rocks into the water. Needless to say, they didn't stick around for much after that. My Friday encounter. So it's 3:27 p.m. I get off the bus. I have a far walk into the woods, so I come up on my hill. It was there. Hairy, brown, pointy head, ape-like, scary, and massive. I went back out later and measured the height, and I saw it was 8.5 feet tall. I'm starting to get used to them now. This past September, I think it was the 3rd weekend my wife and son went ginseng digging. Not far from where we live, in an old, honey hole. My wife said she could hear something in the distance behind them as they walked on the hillside. The sticks was breaking down below them and made her look down, and she saw a massive-sized animal move very fast behind a group of saplings. It shook them violently. What they saw was a reddish-brown creature about 7.5 feet tall, about 3 feet wide. That's no deer. I told her she knows it wasn't a deer, but maybe a bear. I'm not sure, but how does a bear shake trees? Not one tree, but two. She couldn't answer. I know what she saw. My son couldn't wait to come home and tell me about the experience this guy he works with had last night. This guy really never believed in Bigfoot, but with my son telling him about our family's encounters, got him wondering and watching Finding Bigfoot. And just from watching the show, he realized he had some of the same experiences as the rock throwing and some of the noises he couldn't make out what was doing it. Here's what happened last night. His son and his friends were playing out in the yard with a fire going, like a campfire. They live in the country and have woods bordering their property. It was about 11 p.m. and they heard a high-pitched whistle, like a half a wolf whistle. So just playing around, they did a whistle back. They got a reply. Then they just did some other kind of whistles to see if they got a reply as the same whistle they did. But they didn't get a reply. They got the same high-pitched half wolf whistle. This went on for a while and they kind of got a little scared. They went into the house. The dog was carrying on something awful, even foaming at the mouth. It wanted to go out there. So the guy that works with my son took the dog out. He also took a flashlight because of the way the dog was carrying on. As soon as he opened the door, he smelled this strong smell like rotten fish. There isn't any ponds or creeks by his property. The dog really messed up the man's arm with his leash, trying to go after what was out there. He turned his flashlight on and there was red eye shine. It was behind an old swing set that was there from the kids who were small. It moved fast back to the tree line and watched as it ran into the cornfield. The man said he was shaking and couldn't believe what he was seeing. In the morning, they went to where they saw this big dark figure with eye shine, and the grass was pressed down like something heavy was walking there. In the dirt, heavy prints, about 2 to 3 inches deep, but the prints were smudged and not very good. But you could see the path it took. I know it was still a little shaken up about it. This happened in Ohio, Mahoning County, close to the PA border of Lawrence County, PA, the same area where I had my very first Bigfoot encounter over 30 years ago. I believe I was within 20 feet of a very large Sasquatch. I say believe because I was sitting in a tree stand over my bear bait in pitch black. I heard him come down to the bait about 50 yards away. He crunched everything he could crunch in his coming. Sounded like a drunken cow, only biped. He reached my bait and began digging into it when I turned on my fluorescent lamp, which came on very slow. I caught the sight of an arm and a hand before he receded into the darkness. He huffed twice and growled once, and then dead silence. I heard nothing and saw even less. Pitch black means you can't even see your hand in front of your face, but you can hear a squirrel fart at 100 feet. I submitted my report, but it was not published. I know what I saw. It was a hand, not a paw. It led a log in the hand. A bear could not do that. This is around the same time the Cave Junction sighting here in Oregon. I believe that a Bigfoot was pressing down on my tent as my girlfriend and I pretended to be sleeping. We were pretend snoring. This happened in coastal British Columbia back in 2006. There's a lot more to the story, but I'm going to keep it short. Suffice to say, things got really weird. The next night, 3 of us saw what we can only describe as eye glow morphing from dull white to yellow to amber, back to yellow, back to white. Freakiest thing I've ever witnessed. I guesstimate it was about 50 feet away from where we were standing. And no, it wasn't eye shine from ambient light. I had never witnessed it previously and have never witnessed it since. I cannot say what was behind those glowing eyes, but I could tell you there was a blink. Freaky, freaky, freaky. We also had rocks thrown at us too, as recently as fall 2010, Pennsylvania. Once, when we were up there, a fist-sized rock hit my buddy's tent. Well, actually his tarp that was draped above his tent during a rainy afternoon. We were fairly certain something threw it, considering rocks don't normally fall from trees. Funny thing is, the night prior, we had a rock thrown at us after my buddy urinated in a historically active Bigfoot area. It appears that Bigfoots didn't want us there, so I'm fairly certain that the big feet were relatively close to us. I also had what I think was a Bigfoot approach me aggressively twice one night in Ontario. Long story short, I had been leaving food in a specific area one night, and after dropping the food, as I walked away, something came crashing through the woods at me, loudly. I have a thermal, and strangely, nothing showed up on thermal. I suspected the culprit hid behind something or hunkered down as I scanned. This was again within 50 feet of me, no doubt. Strange enough, the exact same thing played itself over again as I worked further up the trail. Crash, crack, thrashing. Something came barreling toward me head on, but again, nothing showed up on the thermal. Probably the scariest moment of my life. Now I'm reluctant to go out alone because of it. The thermal has always been my security blanket. I've seen bear, deer, coyote, etc. with my camera. They are all easy to spot because they show bright white on the monochrome thermal. If it was a bear or a deer, I should have been able to spot it immediately. Can't say what it was, but it was an area that has historically produced what I think is Bigfoot activity. Footprints, wood knocks, and much, much more. I put trail timers all around the bait, so that's how I knew they were coming in at night and what time. In the pitch dark, I could follow his progress just by his footsteps. There was a big tree which had fallen across this little wash, and the bait was on my side of it. It was approximately 4 feet high, and he had to reach over to get to the bait. This is what I saw when I turned on the light. His arm had to be about 8 inches wide at the wrist, and the hand was much bigger. The log he moved to get to the bait was a 5-inch log, and his hand had it in its grip when the light came on. It gets scarier from there. He immediately dropped the log and backed up into the shadow, huffing and growling. Then I heard nothing. No footsteps, no nothing. In my estimation, he had to be at least 8 feet tall. The logistics being, I was 10 feet up in a tree, and the ground sloped to the bait about 20 feet away. The huffing and growling came to me at my level or above. Something used to put me to sleep when I was hunting in southern Ohio. Maybe it needed to pass by and didn't want a problem. About 15 to 20 years ago, I went fishing by myself in the basin. It was early spring. Too early for fishing, but I love to fish. Anyway, it was one of those trips where I didn't really expect to catch anything, so I was just pitying around. I decided to try this little spot near some thick woods. It was about 10 feet from the bank. I was flipping a plastic worm only a few feet away, but as soon as I got in the spot, I noticed a putrid smell. You know, my thought was someone had shot a deer and it had got away and died right here in the woods because it smelled of death, but with the definitive wet hair dog stench. I was thinking maybe it was a buck and I'd get the antlers. Anyway, I was curious to get in the woods just to see it. Well, after not getting a bite for a few minutes and I just couldn't stand the smell anymore, I put my pole down and grabbed this short little paddle I use for steering. I had a long one for moving from one spot to the other. I was just about a few feet from the bank, so I grabbed this one. When I did, I accidentally hit the side of the aluminum boat. It made a loud sound. Bam! Now the rest happened in a split second. The woods in front of me exploded. Something huge took off running. On 2 feet, I could hear the footfalls. Boom, boom, boom. crashing through the woods. And then it jumped in the bayou on the other side of the woods. Ba-whoosh! Whatever it was huge. I never saw it, but the smell was gone. Without realizing, it had grabbed the long paddle. I promise y'all, I broke some rowing records. I paddled so hard, I actually pulled my right pectoral muscle so badly, I couldn't use my arm for weeks after. When I got to the other side near my truck, I jumped out of my boat, wrapped the rope around my trailer hitch, jumped in my truck, and just pulled my boat out of the water, up the levee. It was flying down the gravel road. I had to tell myself, stop, man, you're going to tear your boat apart. I had to stop and compose myself. I never told anyone. But when I got home, my wife could tell something had happened. Now, since my close sighting from when I was young, I never ever went near the basin without my shotgun. It was in my boat, in arm's reach that day. I never even thought about grabbing it. I just reacted. My very first encounter, I was walking out from bow hunting, blind, early October. It was getting really dark back in the blind, so I sneak out quietly in the grass to the edge of our hayfield and sit for the rest of the daylight to fade. Well, in the evening, I smelled something awful. I thought, man, this pond stinks. I got a few more steps and heard and felt a big, loud, deep huff, growl, bark. And my first thought was, oh hell, I startled a bear. I stayed still quite some time looking everywhere. Foliage was still on the trees and I still saw nothing, but I could smell this swampy, musky crap, rotten smell the whole time. Bears stink often, so I assumed with the huff it was a bear and walked out backwards to the middle of the high rise. The next week, I figured out it wasn't a bear. What I seen wasn't blurry, but I didn't have a camera either, and the encounter didn't last more than 5 or 6 seconds at the most. If I saw another, what would I do, even if I had the world's best cam? I don't know. Walking through the woods in the Barrens, home of the Jersey Devil. I've always worshipped the idea, until one time I went out there with a girlfriend. The noise and odd look was definitely no devil. In fact, a peaceful vibe. Long story short, as we were walking back to our car, we heard distant steps matching our own. We thought, echo? But in the woods? Not to mention, we were so deep in the Barrens, you could hear your own heartbeat, and no insects were making a sound at this point. Slowly walking, we kept turning around. She got nervous and moved faster. Me, on the other hand, for some reason, have no fear of whatever it is. I walked slowly. I sat down. She said I was nuts, but she said she knew if it was what I thought it was, I was in a peace zone. As I sat there, she went back and sat next to me. In the distance, the old-fashioned cracked branch noise was happening while sitting still. No fear, kept my peace. Whatever it was didn't run away. I almost had an alter ego take over me. I had no smile on my face, just a primitive. All the energy was coming from my mind to whatever it was. Still not seeing anything, I finally got up, walked out more. Then it happened. Thinking it was the butt of a deer or a hunter, I saw something standing in the distance. It definitely knew I was there. I got this feeling of joy. It was similar to a Six Rivers story experience I had. Almost like we met up again. It just stood there. I could see the outline, dark, very black. From a distance, it looked black because in the woods, color isn't easy to extinguish. Plus, scientific reality, I could tell, not features on its body. I just knew it wasn't a human. If it was, I was wrong. But there wasn't a smell, as it was too far down. However, the craziest part, when we walked directly towards it. It didn't move for a whole minute. I continued walking right past where it was standing. Because we got maybe a few feet closer, it walked off behind wherever it was standing. There were 2 big rocks where it was standing, so it didn't have footprints. along with gravel trail behind it that stretched for a good length, with trees all along the side. I wasn't going out to look, as I was more worried about Jackson Whites. I didn't even look for prints. Blame my ADD, but I wasn't worried about it. I knew what I was encountering, as I've had this happen before. Even if I did find prints, maybe I'd take a photo. Maybe. I like to keep things personal. No smell either. The only piece of evidence I had, myself, was the small scrapes on the tree to the left of the rock. My story starts off with my brother and I were hunting. We found a campsite by a little water hole. Noticed some deer at the end of the meadow, so I went up the side of the meadow. When I got there, where I thought the deer were, I belly crawled over to a large log. I rolled up on the log and sighted it on with a deer when they noticed me. I was about to shoot when a female Bigfoot looked at me. Our eyes met. I rolled back over in disbelief of what I saw. I could hear it run away, so I got up and started to walk back to camp. Then I seen her again, watching me. I still couldn't believe it. Then later on at night, I was in my tent when I heard something, looked at, and I saw two more larger ones and a skinny one. I decided to get in my truck for some reason. They never bothered me. Then in the morning, I walked out to the water hole and saw a foot and knee prints. My brother didn't believe me, so I pushed him out there. He was in a wheelchair. When I first saw the female, she was feeding a deer grass while she sat on the log. She was light gray with brown eyes, very large eyes. This took place in the Umatilla National Forest. I was 12 years old, late summer 1994. We were in the hills above Council, Idaho, gathering firewood. Dad had felled the last tree of the day, and I was running the smaller chainsaw, limbing, while he was cutting rounds. My mom and 10-year-old brother were rolling the cut rounds to the truck. I set my saw down and stepped across the road to take a leak. My brother, being a typical little brother, decided to throw rocks at me while I was peeing. He chucked a tennis ball rock past my head, and when it went into the bushes, we heard a muffled groan. Less than 10 feet away from me stands up a sasquatch. He was rubbing his chest where the rock hit him. He looked me in the eye, and he gave me a very annoyed look at my brother before walking down a steep embankment. Both parents witnessed this from the hill up above the truck. Before I even zipped my pants back up, Dad had thrown both saws and the gear in the truck and was pulling me backwards. As we were leaving, the Sasquatch appeared again, running alongside the truck. He followed us until Dad could get on a smooth section of the road and outrun him. Alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he'd be gone all night long, and she'd complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often they would stay there all night long. The young woman would stay home all by herself. After a while, she began to act in a strange way. At least that's what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming. That was a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and 2 little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her sons, she said. They wanted her to live with them, but she had gotten away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in a hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared. But now and then, a fisherman would tell us about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually it was one big alligator and two small ones, but people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here.
The flesh of the unguided and non-believers fuel this void.
Hey, I'm Connor from Bigfoot Anon, and I'm always on the hunt for the next big adventure. When you're on the trail for long hours, you build up quite the stench, enough to drive any skunk ape or yeti away. Luckily, I'm on the quest now for the solution to all my problems. Yeti bars. They do exist. Available in tons of different scents and fragrances. Check out yetibars.net for more and use my code BA10 for a special offer. Clean like a beast. Yeti bars!